Do you ever wonder why some men vanish from a woman's memory as quickly as smoke in the wind, while others live on in her thoughts like an echo she cannot silence? It is not the face. Even the most flawless features fade with time. It is not the body. Strength, no matter how impressive, eventually loses its novelty. And it is not the sweet words. Words dissolve into the air the moment they are spoken. No, the secret goes deeper, much deeper. It lives in the hidden corridors of the unconscious mind, where logic has no control. It is the quiet mark carved into her memory, the unexplainable pull that returns again and again no matter how much time has passed. This is where power begins. And this is why history has always feared and admired those who understood it. Figures like Machiavelli, who never wrote about love, yet revealed truths about power that still govern desire itself. Because attraction is not born from gifts or grand declarations. It is born from invisible influence, the kind of presence that stirs something inside her she cannot explain and cannot forget. Think about it. What lingers in someone's mind? Is it the person who gave everything too quickly, or the one who left just enough unsaid, just enough unseen to ignite the imagination? The man who is remembered is not the one who empties himself completely. He is the one who holds back, who understands that desire is not about constant giving, but about restraint. This is the paradox most men will never grasp. The more you try to be remembered, the faster you fade. The less you demand attention, the more unforgettable you become. Because the human mind is wired not for what is obvious, but for what is incomplete. Picture this. She meets two men. One reveals everything: his thoughts, his emotions, his wounds, his fears. He leaves no room for mystery. At first, it feels comforting, but soon it becomes predictable. A finished book, a solved puzzle, a song with no unfinished note. And so, she forgets him. But then there's the other man. He doesn't play games, yet he does not reveal everything. He leaves silence where others would rush to fill it. He lets his smile suggest more than it explains. He gives glimpses, not confessions. And without realizing it, her mind begins to circle around him, replaying fragments, filling in blanks, asking questions he never answered. And this is where obsession is born. Not from what is shown in the light, but from what remains hidden in the shadows. Machiavelli warned rulers, reveal too much and you lose command. The same truth applies in love. A man who floods a woman with availability, with explanations, with endless reassurance, suffocates her imagination. He becomes safe, but safe is not unforgettable. The unforgettable man is different. He does not chase, he does not beg, he does not plead to be remembered. Instead, he becomes a presence that stands on its own, calm, steady, unshaken. When a man no longer bends himself for approval, something changes in his energy. His silence weighs more than another man's shouting. His stillness carries more than 1,000 explanations. And that kind of presence carves itself into her unconscious like a mark that time cannot erase. But presence is only the first blade. The second, perhaps even sharper, is the blade of mystery. The female mind does not cling to what it fully understands. It clings to the unsolved. It turns again and again around riddles it cannot decode. And every unanswered glance, every purposeful silence, every unfinished gesture becomes a doorway she walks through in her own imagination. And here's the most fascinating part. Once her mind begins working for you, filling silence with her own energy, inventing answers to questions you never confirmed, you have already stepped into a place where you cannot be expelled. Because now, you don't just live in her memory, you live in her imagination. And there, you are not bound by reality. You become larger, brighter, deeper. You become the unfinished melody her mind cannot stop replaying. Absence, the single most misunderstood force in attraction. Most men believe that to be remembered, they must constantly remain present, always messaging, always calling, always showing up. They think that their devotion is what secures their place in a woman's heart. But in truth, constant presence is the quickest path to becoming invisible. Because what is always available is taken for granted. And what is taken for granted is forgotten. Think of your own life. Which moments burn most deeply in your memory? Is it the days that repeated the same routine, safe and predictable? Or is it the sudden silence after someone you once depended on disappeared? The empty space where their voice once was, the unanswered question left behind, the absence that pressed heavier than their presence ever did. This is the paradox. We remember more of what we lose than what we keep. And the man who understands this, who learns to vanish, not in weakness, but in strength, etches himself into her unconscious, like fire branded into stone. Machiavelli once wrote that rulers did not control through constant punishment, but through the quiet reminder of strength, a reminder that lingered even when unseen. In the realm of desire, the same law holds true. Presence pleases, but absence haunts. There was once a man named Armin. For years, Armin built his life around a single woman. Every morning began with her name on his lips. His phone glowed with messages he sent, carefully crafted to make her smile. His time bent around her schedule, canceling plans, reshaping priorities, waiting on her every word. If she needed comfort, he was there. If she needed advice, he was there. If she needed company, he was there. To him, this was love. To him, this was loyalty. To him, this was proof that he was unforgettable. But to her, it became background noise. His presence, once warm, grew predictable. His devotion, once flattering, became ordinary. And slowly, like music that plays too long in the background, she stopped hearing it at all. Armin believed that by always being there, he would secure her heart. But in truth, he made himself forgettable, because what is constant becomes invisible. Then one day, something inside Armin broke. He looked at himself honestly, and what he saw was not strength, but emptiness. He realized he had poured his entire fires into keeping hers alive. And in the process, his own light had dimmed. His body had grown weak, his ambitions forgotten, his mind restless. He was not a man anymore. He was a shadow orbiting around her world. And in that painful moment of clarity, he chose something different. He withdrew. Not with bitterness, not with anger, not with dramatic words or desperate explanations. He simply stopped orbiting. The constant messages ceased. The availability vanished. The safe, predictable Armin disappeared. Instead, he reclaimed his time. He rebuilt his body, not to impress her, but to strengthen himself. He pursued his passions again, not to distract himself, but to rediscover his identity. He invested in his mind, in his craft, in his ambitions. And then, he vanished. No complaints, no explanations, no noise, just silence. At first, she barely noticed. She assumed he would return. After all, he always did. But days stretched into weeks. Weeks blurred into months, and the silence grew heavier. Suddenly, she found herself unsettled. Her thoughts, once free, began circling around him. His absence screamed louder than his presence ever had. She replayed his laughter. She remembered his calm gaze. She recalled the little gestures she once ignored. And in that quiet, something new took root, a gnawing sense of loss. Her mind, desperate for closure, began inventing stories. Where was he? Why had he changed? Who was he with? Why couldn't she stop thinking of him? This is the raw psychology of desire. The human brain cannot stand incompleteness. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember unfinished stories longer than completed ones. And Armin, by vanishing with quiet strength, had become the unfinished story she could not put down. She reached out. Her voice trembled. Her words stumbled. "I don't know what you did, but I can't stop thinking about you." And in that moment, Armin understood the truth. He had not manipulated her. He had not tricked her. He had simply reclaimed himself. By stepping into his own power, he became unforgettable. Not because he chased her memory, but because he stopped needing to be remembered. And here lies the paradox every man must face. When you chase, you are forgotten. When you vanish with strength, you are remembered. When you beg for a place in her thoughts, she pushes you away. But when you stand firm in your worth, she pulls you in. Absence without strength is weakness, but absence with authority, that is power. Armin's story is not rare. It is the story of countless men who lose themselves in pursuit of validation, only to discover that the real secret was never outside, it was within. Because the man who learns to disappear with calm authority does not just leave a memory, he leaves an obsession. Every great story shares one secret. It is not the polished ending that lingers in our minds, but the unanswered question. Think about the films or books that stay with you. Are they the ones that tied everything neatly together, or the ones that left a single thread untied, a single mystery unresolved? Human memory clings not to clarity, but to uncertainty, because what is complete can be put away. What is unfinished demands attention. This is the enigma principle, and it applies not only to art, but to attraction. A man who explains himself completely, who pours out every thought, every fear, every desire, becomes predictable. He becomes a solved puzzle, safe, clear, and forgettable. But the man who holds back, who speaks less than he knows, who smiles in ways that hint at more than they reveal, becomes a riddle, and riddles haunt the mind. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect. The brain hates incompleteness. A song that ends abruptly echoes longer than one that finishes perfectly. A conversation that trails off leaves us replaying it in our minds more than one that gave us all the answers. When you leave silences with intention, when you allow pauses to carry meaning, when you let her imagination fill in the blanks, you step into the deepest level of influence. Because now, it is not your effort that keeps you alive in her memory. It is her own unconscious energy replaying and reconstructing you. Every unanswered glance becomes a question. Every purposeful silence becomes a clue. Every gesture withheld becomes a door she cannot help but open in her imagination. And suddenly, you are not just a man she met. You are an unfinished melody. Let us return to Armand. After his disappearance, he did not return with explanations. He did not tell her why he had gone silent, nor what he had been doing. He left gaps. He left space. And those spaces burned in her mind. When they finally met again, his presence had shifted. He was calmer, stronger, more composed. His silence was not the silence of weakness, but of restraint. His gaze no longer begged to be understood. It invited her to wonder. And that is where the true transformation happened. She remembered him not because of the words he spoke, but because of the questions he left unanswered. She felt pulled not by what he gave, but by what he withheld. He had become an enigma, and enigmas cannot be forgotten. Think of it like fire. Fire is beautiful not because it reveals everything, but because it flickers, dances, hides, and shows at the same time. A fire contained within glass mesmerizes because it is both dangerous and safe, visible and mysterious. That is the paradox of attraction. A man who is completely known loses his fire. A man who carries an edge, who reveals glimpses but not the whole picture, keeps the flame alive. The human heart does not crave perfection. Perfection kills intrigue. The human heart craves contrast, comfort and uncertainty together, safety wrapped around danger. This is why a woman does not obsess over the man who bows to every request, who apologizes for every silence, who explains every feeling. That man creates no spark. He dissolves into the background of her memory. But the man who remains slightly unsolved, the one who carries mystery within his calmness, becomes unforgettable. And here is the deeper truth. When she thinks of you, she will not remember every word you said. She will remember the state you created in her, the tension of uncertainty, the thrill of curiosity, the comfort of your steadiness mixed with the riddle of your restraint. This is what burns itself into her unconscious. Not sentences, not facts, but states of being. She may forget the man who gave her everything, but she will never forget the one who made her wonder. This is the riddle effect, the psychology of becoming a haunting presence. It is not manipulation, it is not dishonesty, it is restraint. The discipline to leave doors half open instead of forcing them shut. The wisdom to reveal just enough to spark her imagination, but never enough to let the fire burn out. And once her own mind begins to work for you, once she finds herself replaying your words, filling your silences with her own questions, you no longer need to fight for space in her memory. You live there rent-free. You are not just remembered, you are replayed. You are not just a story she once read. You are the unfinished chapter she cannot put down. That is the enigma principle. That is how a man becomes more than a memory. He becomes a shadow that lingers, a riddle that echoes, an imprint that time cannot erase. There is a truth few dare to admit. Women do not fall into obsession with men who are only safe, nor do they remain with men who are only dangerous. What binds them to memory, what ties them to desire, is the rare fusion of both. This is the duality, danger contained within discipline, power hidden behind restraint. It is this paradox that ignites obsession. Think of a fire that rages uncontrolled, destroys everything in its path. It is chaos, terrifying but unsustainable. A fire that never burns at all is lifeless, cold, invisible. but a fire that flickers inside boundaries. A fireplace, a lantern, a torch gives warmth, light, and awe. It captivates because it is both powerful and contained. The same is true of male energy. A man with uncontrolled aggression repels. A man with no edge at all becomes forgettable. But a man with restrained intensity who could unleash chaos, yet chooses not to, becomes unforgettable. This is where obsession takes root. Because beside such a man, a woman feels two truths at once. She feels safe, yet not fully secure. She feels comfort, yet awakened by tension. It is this tension that electrifies her, the sense that with him, anything could happen, yet he will never let chaos consume her. And the human mind does not crave only comfort. Comfort without risk dulls the soul. The mind craves contrast. It craves risk under control, unpredictability wrapped in stability. That is what makes a man unforgettable. He is not flawless. He is not polished into perfection. He is powerful in his imperfections, dangerous in his capacity, and magnetic in his restraint. Let us return one final time to Armand. When she finally saw him again, he was different. Not because he had become someone else, but because he had finally reclaimed the fire within himself. He no longer begged for space in her world. He carried his own world within him. His silence was heavy, his gaze calm. But beneath that calm, she felt something deeper, a storm he had mastered. She sensed he could break rules, but only when he chose. She sensed he could unleash chaos, but he held it beneath iron control. And that awareness did something no words ever could. It unsettled her and comforted her at the same time. It made her feel alive. For the first time, she could not define him. He was not only safe, he was not only dangerous, he was both. He was the paradox, and that paradox became unforgettable. Understand this. Perfection makes you replaceable, but contrast makes you unforgettable. A man who gives everything, who hides nothing, who bows to every demand, is remembered like a pleasant melody sweet in the moment, forgotten the next. But the man who carries an edge, who reveals glimpses of danger yet holds them under discipline, carves himself into the unconscious. He is not just a memory, he is a mark. Because when she remembers him, she does not recall exact words or gestures. She remembers the state he created, the pulse of uncertainty, the weight of security, the thrill of danger under control. That is the tattoo etched into her unconscious. That is what lingers when all else fades. And this is the final lesson of Machiavellian presence. Power is not found in being always safe. Power is not found in being only feared. True power is in being both feared and trusted, desired and respected, dangerous yet disciplined. The man who embodies this duality becomes more than attractive. He becomes addictive. He becomes the paradox her mind cannot solve, the storm she cannot contain, the riddle she cannot forget, and time cannot erase him. So, the question returns to you. Will you remain the man who gives everything away too quickly, who becomes safe, predictable, invisible? Or will you step into the paradox, learning the strength of silence, the art of absence, the fire of discipline, and the edge of danger? Because the truth is brutal. The man who cannot rule himself will never rule desire, but the man who learns to master both chaos and calm, who understands the paradox of mystery and presence, writes his mark not just in memory, but in the unconscious itself. He does not become a chapter in her story. He becomes the story she never stops telling herself.